Hi, Terry here, and welcome to Times Gone Tech. So, today I'm working on part 2 of my 15th century German Hackenbusche handgun. And what I'm doing today is I'm sanding the stock down. And I've worked it down first with some 100 grit on a belt sander, because this was kind of rough when it came in. Not super rough, but it was a little on the rough side. And I worked it down with some 100 grit belt sand, and now I'm finishing that up with some 100 grit just plain paper, using a piece of wood for a sanding block, and then I'm going to do some hand sanding also. And then I'm going to go over it with some 120, some 180, and some 220, and I'm going to call that done. I'm not going to put a super fine finish on it, probably because the originals weren't all that super finely finished. But while I'm working on this, something that I wanted to talk about again, which I've mentioned before, is, and you've heard of me say this before, and you hear other people saying it too, and that is, when you're going to do business with the rifle shop, or as I like to call them, TRS, you'll hear people say things like, patience is a virtue. Well, it's actually more than a virtue. It is a requirement. If you've been spoiled, like I have been, by eBay and Amazon, where everything is in stock in a warehouse and you can place your order on Monday and your part comes in on Thursday, that ain't going to happen with the rifle shop. That's just not going to happen. That's not how they do business. In fact, ordering something from the rifle shop, in my opinion, is a lot like ordering something through the Sears and Roebuck catalog back in 1960. Now, many of y'all probably weren't around in 1960. If you were, too young to remember it. And for some of y'all, your parents probably weren't even born. In fact, for some of it, your grandparents may not even have been born in 1960. But let me give you a little idea of what life was like back then. There was no internet. There were no cell phones. There were no computers outside of secret government and university research facilities. No flat screen TVs, no video games, no portable phones or cordless phones at all. In fact, we only had 3 television channels where I live, which, by the way, I grew up deep in the heart of the Ozark Mountains in southwest Missouri, almost right on the Arkansas border. In fact, we didn't even have PBS. We only had ABC, NBC, and CBS. And everybody that lived out in that neighborhood, if you want to call it a neighborhood, had a TV antenna up on the roof in order to watch television with. Well, we were so far out in the sticks, we not only had an antenna up on the roof, but we also had a set of rabbit ears inside the house sitting on top of the TV set with strips of aluminum foil tied all over it. We didn't even need to look outside to see what the weather was doing. We could tell by the amount of static and what kind of static was on the TV set. We could tell what the weather was all around the entire area, especially between us and town. We didn't need no weather channel. And I can remember on several occasions, it being so windy outside, my daddy would have me standing beside the TV set with one hand on the rabbit ears, holding the other hand up in the air, facing town, so he could finish watching the ball game on a Sunday afternoon. Well, back in those days, there was a catalog called the Sears and Roebuck. And it got to where it would come out seasonally. They were smaller, would come out, 3 or 4 times a year. But back in 1960, there was one catalog. It came out in January, right after New Year's. It was about 6 inches thick. And you could order pretty much anything except a boat, a car, or an airplane out of that magazine. Hell, you could even buy a 2-story house with a garage with a concrete driveway. Well, it wasn't built yet. You got the blueprints and you got everything you needed to put that house together, delivered to whatever address you gave them. But it was everything you would need to build that house. In 1962, my daddy bought a pre-64 Model 94 Winchester 30-30 deer rifle and a case of ammunition from the Sears and Roebuck catalog. Cost him about $50, I think, which he thought was just an exorbitant amount of money back in those days. Came straight to the front door, no background check, no waiting period, no registration. You could order guns. You could order ammunition. You could order knives. In fact, I remember seeing double-barreled flintlock shotguns for sale in the 1960 Sears and Roebuck catalog. You could buy clothes, toys, kitchen utensils, house paint, shingles, electrical supplies. I mean, pretty much anything. So that catalog would come in January, right after New Year's. And of course, the kids would have to look at it first. And then once we had a gander at it, parents would look through it. And in February, they would sit down at the kitchen table and they would work out an order. They had order forms in the catalog. They'd tear it and fill it out, do the math themselves. Pocket calculators didn't exist yet then either. Back then, people could read and do math. And they would place about 3 orders a year, I guess. My mother would be ordering our summer clothes in February, our winter coats in July. Dad would be ordering, well, he ordered that 30-30. He ordered a shotgun. He ordered a chipper shredder, a lawnmower. I mean, work clothes, boots, hunting clothes, everything from that Sears and Roebuck catalog. They would fill out the order form, write a paper check, put everything together in an envelope, put a stamp on the envelope, and then hand it to us kids to put in the mailbox. Now, back in those days, our mailbox was not on the front porch. Hell, it wasn't even out at the end of the driveway. Our mailbox was about a quarter of a mile down a dirt road, sitting on a rail with 5 other mailboxes. And we would walk down with the dogs. We'd put that order form in the mailbox, and then we'd wait and wait and wait and wait. Hell, we'd wait so long we'd forget they even placed an order. The kids would, and we'd completely forget about it. And then one day, about 3 months later, there'd be a pile of packages and boxes sitting on the front porch. That order came in, and everything was there. Everything was in proper shape, good condition. Boxes, packaging was all good. Nothing was missing. Nothing was broken. Everything was exactly as it was advertised. You just had to wait. And I'm not really sure why it took so long, about 3 months to get an order in, but that's about how long it took. Well, ordering something from the rifle shop is about like that. And it's not because they're slow or they don't care or anything like that. So, if you are working for the rifle shop, trust me, I have nothing but the greatest respect for you. It's how they do business. It's how they make their parts. They don't keep a lot of stuff in stock. I don't know if they keep anything in stock. They don't make stuff in advance, so they don't have a warehouse full of things. They don't even have a shipping department. They stopped work on Friday, and everybody that was doing something else, like the people who was making this stock, on Friday, they put the stock aside, they all get together, and they package up and ship out whatever they can in one day. So they might have it in their hand for 3 weeks, but it may take that long to actually get it in a package in the mail because the order goes on the bottom of the stack and it works its way to the top. And they get as much done as they can and do it right. So the way they make these parts, as I've said before, I kind of touched on anyway, they take an original or an historically accurate reproduction and they take it apart. They disassemble it. They use the components to make molds off of. They then make wax castings of those molds, and they use a cold injection, low temperature injection casting. The wax itself probably isn't even completely melted. It's more like a paste, and it's injected under pressure into the mold. So it doesn't really shrink when it dries. And when they get enough of those molds made, or enough of those castings made, they put them together on what's called a tree, And there might be a couple dozen, maybe 100 castings, wax castings, all hooked together with casting sprues and little gates and things on that central core, that sprue. When they get enough of them, they send the tree out to a local foundry to get it cast. And then they dip it in a solution of a special type of ceramic, dust it off with a silicon powder, like kind of a fine sand. And when that dries, they dip it again, dust it again, let that dry, dip it again, dust it again, and so on until they build up the coating. Then they fire that ceramic coating, burn the wax out, and harden that ceramic. And then they cast it in steel or brass or bronze or iron, whatever they're making. So they don't cut parts out of a big sheet of steel with a computer-controlled plasma torch. They cast these parts individually by hand, exactly the way they were made back in the period. Not only that, they even use the exact same type of steel or brass formula, whatever they're making, as was used to make the original. Example is, if you buy a modern gun kit, say a Kibler kit, the springs in that kit will have been cut out of a piece of sheet spring steel with a plasma torch, heated up, bent into shape, then hardened and tempered. Well, the rifle shop has theirs cast in shape using the exact formula of steel that was used, say, back in the 1700s or 1600s or whatever. So if the originals used, say, a lot of manganese in their steel, then the rifle shop puts manganese in their steel. Then they ship it out to us where we get to harden and temper it. If we can't or don't want to, they will do it for a fee. But that's how they work. And like I said, even when they get the parts ready, they go on the bottom of the list. And once a week, they ship out what they can put together and get shipped out. And it'll be packaged right. Everything will be there. It'll be exactly what you ordered. It's just that you want to place your order. Make sure you get your math right, because they do not calculate tax or shipping for you. You got to do that yourself. So you got to fill out the order form. You can do it electronically now, but you still got to sit down at the kitchen table with your laptop, fill out the form, do the math, then give them the information to pay for it if you don't want to send them a check. Place the order, and then forget about it. Just wait. Just completely forget about it. It can take up to 14 weeks to get a set of castings made, especially if there's any problems at the foundry. Sometimes things happen and they could lose an entire batch and they have to start all over again. So it might take 7 weeks. It might take 14 weeks. That's 3 months. It could take 3 months just to get the castings made. It can. And then it goes on the bottom of the shipping list, and it can take another 3 or 4 weeks to work its way up to the top before it actually gets shipped out. I kind of like that in a way. It reminds me of how life used to be, how people used to live, how things used to work. It reminds me of that Sears and Roebuck catalog back in 1960. So anyway, I think this is about good enough. It's got a couple little dents in it here and there. It's not going to come out, I don't think. So I'm going to switch over to 120, work everything down again, and then I'm going to go down to a 180 and then a 220 and call it done.